In the early 19th century, Britain stood at a crossroads between tradition and transformation. The Industrial Revolution was reshaping cities, industry was expanding at an unprecedented rate, and political reform simmered beneath the surface of aristocratic stability. Into this changing world, in 1819, was born Alexandrina Victoria, the only child of Prince Edward, Duke of Kent. Her father died when she was just 8 months old, leaving her upbringing to her German-born mother, the Duchess of Kent, under a strict and suffocating system known as the Kensington system. Designed to control and protect the young princess, this regime limited her interactions, isolated her from court politics, and ensured that she would grow up dependent on her mother and her advisors. Ironically, this restrictive childhood would later forge in Victoria a deep determination to assert her independence once she ascended the throne. By the time Victoria was a teenager, it had become increasingly clear that she would inherit the British crown. The previous monarchs, her uncles, had produced no legitimate surviving heirs. When King William Roman IV died in June 1837, the 18-year-old Victoria was awakened at Kensington Palace and informed that she was now Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Her first recorded words were composed, yet revealing. She requested a moment alone to gather herself. In that quiet pause, the sheltered princess became a sovereign ruler. It marked the beginning of a reign that would last 63 years and 7 months, longer than any British monarch before her. Victoria's early reign was shaped by youth, inexperience, and political maneuvering. At first, she relied heavily on her prime minister, Lord Melbourne, who became a mentor and fatherly figure. Melbourne guided her through constitutional complexities, advising her on parliamentary matters and helping her navigate the intricacies of governance in a constitutional monarchy. Britain's system limited the monarch's direct power, but influence, symbolism, and political engagement remained crucial. Victoria quickly learned that her role was not merely ceremonial. It required intelligence, discipline, and emotional control. In 1840, she married Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a union that profoundly influenced her reign. Though initially viewed with suspicion by some British elites because of his German origins, Albert proved to be a thoughtful, reform-minded partner. He encouraged advancements in science, education, and the arts, and he played a key role in organizing the Great Exhibition of 1851, which showcased Britain's industrial might and technological innovation. Their marriage was both romantic and strategic. Victoria adored Albert deeply, and together they cultivated an image of domestic virtue that resonated strongly with the British public. Their partnership symbolized stability, morality, and industriousness, values that came to define what is now called the Victorian era. During these early decades, Britain was experiencing rapid transformation. Factories multiplied, railways connected distant towns, and urban populations swelled. While industrial growth created wealth and technological progress, it also produced stark inequality. Crowded slums, child labor, and dangerous working conditions exposed the darker side of economic expansion. As monarch, Victoria did not directly legislate reform, but her reign coincided with significant parliamentary acts addressing labor conditions, public health, and voting rights. The monarchy provided a sense of continuity amid upheaval. Internationally, Britain was already an imperial power, but the foundations of unprecedented expansion were forming. Colonies in India, the Caribbean, Canada, Australia, and parts of Africa strengthened Britain's global reach. Trade routes connected London to distant continents. The Royal Navy dominated the seas, protecting commerce and projecting influence. Victoria's early years as queen unfolded alongside this expanding imperial framework, which would grow dramatically in the decades to follow. The 1840s and 1850 were also marked by political turbulence. Movements advocating democratic reform gained momentum. The Chartists demanded expanded suffrage and political representation. Ireland suffered the catastrophic Great Famine beginning in 1845, leading to mass starvation and emigration. These crises tested Britain's resilience and highlighted tensions within the empire. Victoria's role during such events was largely symbolic, yet symbolism mattered deeply in an age when national identity was closely tied to the crown. Tragedy struck in 1861 when Prince Albert died of typhoid fever. Victoria was devastated. She withdrew from public life, entering a prolonged period of mourning that drew criticism from those who expected visibility and ceremonial presence from their monarch. Yet her grief was genuine and enduring. She wore black for the remainder of her life, reinforcing the image of a solemn, duty-bound queen. Over time, public perception softened, and her steadfast mourning became intertwined with the moral seriousness associated with the Victorian Age itself. By the end of her early reign, Victoria had matured from a sheltered girl into a formidable monarch whose name defined an era. She had witnessed industrial growth, social unrest, cultural flowering, and the strengthening of Britain's global influence. The foundations were set not only for a powerful empire, but for a distinctive period in history marked by ambition, discipline, expansion, and transformation. The young queen who once asked for a private moment before assuming the crown had grown into a symbol of national endurance and authority. As Victoria's reign progressed into its middle decades, Britain's imperial expansion accelerated dramatically. By the late 19th century, the British Empire had become the largest empire in history, spanning continents and encompassing nearly a quarter of the world's population. The phrase, "the sun never sets on the British Empire," became more than poetic exaggeration. It described a geopolitical reality in which British territories stretched from Canada to India, from Australia to vast regions of Africa. India stood at the heart of imperial ambition. Following the Indian Rebellion of 1857, the British government dissolved the rule of the East India Company and placed India directly under the crown. In 1876, Victoria was proclaimed Empress of India, a title that symbolized imperial authority at its height. The British administration in India expanded railways, telegraphs, and legal systems, reshaping the subcontinent's infrastructure. Yet imperial governance also imposed economic exploitation and cultural dominance, altering traditional societies and generating resistance that would echo into the 20th century. Africa became another focal point during the so-called Scramble for Africa. European powers competed aggressively for territory, resources, and strategic advantage. Britain secured Egypt to protect the Suez Canal, an essential route to India, and expanded influence into Sudan, South Africa, and East Africa. These expansions were justified in Britain as civilizing missions, but they often involved military conflict, displacement, and economic control over indigenous populations. The empire's growth brought wealth and prestige to Britain while deeply affecting colonized societies. In North America, Canada evolved into a self-governing dominion, demonstrating a different model of imperial relationship. Australia and New Zealand developed similar structures. These settler colonies retained loyalty to the crown while gaining increasing autonomy. The empire was not monolithic. It was a complex web of territories, protectorates, dominions, and trading posts connected by naval power and economic exchange. Technological advancements underpinned imperial dominance. Steamships reduced travel time across oceans. Telegraph cables enabled near-instant communication between London and distant colonies. Railways facilitated troop movement and resource extraction. Industrial output supplied manufactured goods that were traded globally. Britain's economic power reinforced its military reach, and its military reach secured economic interests. Victoria's personal involvement in policy was limited by constitutional constraints, yet her symbolic presence reinforced imperial unity. Jubilees celebrating the 50th and 60th anniversaries of her reign became grand spectacles of imperial pride. Delegations from across the empire attended, displaying cultural diversity under the banner of British authority. These events strengthened a sense of shared imperial identity among colonists while projecting power to rival nations. However, empire was not without cost. Wars such as the Crimean War and the Anglo-Zulu War demonstrated the human toll of expansion. Colonial conflicts required resources and lives. Critics within Britain questioned imperial ethics and expenses, yet supporters argued that empire brought prosperity, trade, and global influence. By the late 19th century, Britain was widely regarded as the world's foremost superpower. The empire influenced culture and society within Britain itself. Exotic goods, global news, and imperial narratives permeated daily life. Museums displayed artifacts from distant lands. Literature celebrated exploration and conquest. Missionary movements spread Christianity abroad while reinforcing moral justification for expansion. The Victorian worldview combined industrial confidence with imperial ambition, believing in progress, hierarchy, and national destiny. As the century neared its close, Britain faced rising competition from Germany and the United States. Yet at the time of Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897, the empire stood unrivaled in scale and influence. The elderly queen, once a young and uncertain monarch, now symbolized continuity across decades of expansion. Her reign encapsulated the zenith of British global dominance. The final years of Victoria's reign reflected both triumph and transition. Britain remained powerful, but the world was changing. Industrialization had reshaped society beyond recognition. Urban centers pulsed with factories, commerce, and innovation. The middle class expanded, driven by education, professional employment, and entrepreneurial success. Meanwhile, working-class movements demanded greater rights and representation. Victorian society emphasized morality, discipline, and family values. Gender roles were clearly defined, with ideals of domesticity shaping expectations for women, even as economic necessity often required their labor. Scientific progress flourished during this era. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution challenged traditional religious beliefs. Medical advancements improved life expectancy. Engineering feats like the London Underground and massive bridges symbolized human ingenuity. Culturally, the Victorian Age produced enduring literature and art. Writers such as Charles Dickens, the Bronte sisters, and Thomas Hardy explored themes of social inequality, industrialization, and moral complexity. Gothic architecture revived medieval aesthetics, and grand public buildings reflected civic pride. Education reforms expanded literacy, fostering a more informed population. Victoria herself became increasingly revered in old age. Though once criticized for her seclusion after Albert's death, she regained popularity as a grandmotherly national figure. Her image appeared on coins, stamps, and public monuments. She embodied stability in a rapidly transforming world. Yet beneath the grandeur, tensions simmered. Ireland's demand for home rule intensified. Labor unions organized strikes. International rivalries hinted at conflicts to come. The empire's vastness concealed fragility. Maintaining global dominance required constant vigilance and adaptation. When Queen Victoria died in January 1901, an era ended. Her funeral procession symbolized both mourning and continuity. She was succeeded by her son, Edward Roman VII, marking the beginning of the Edwardian era. But the Victorian Age left an indelible mark on history. Her reign oversaw the transformation of Britain into an industrial and imperial titan. It witnessed social reform, technological revolution, and cultural flourishing. It also encompassed inequality, colonial exploitation, and geopolitical tension. The complexity of the Victorian era mirrors the complexity of Victoria herself, a monarch shaped by duty, personal devotion, and an unwavering sense of responsibility. Today, historians view her reign as a defining chapter in global history. The structures built during her time influenced the 20th century profoundly. The British Empire would eventually decline, but its impact, political, cultural, and economic, remains visible worldwide. Queen Victoria's story is not merely that of a monarch. It is the story of an age defined by ambition, industry, expansion, and transformation. From a sheltered princess to the symbolic matriarch of a global empire, her life paralleled Britain's ascent to unprecedented power. Her era stands as a testament to both human achievement and historical complexity, a period when the world was bound together more tightly than ever before under the banner of empire.